Hi, welcome to the Spotlight webinar for this March of 2025. Today is a bit of a special day because we are very, very close to the release of Process Director version 6.1.300. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk a little bit about the release itself. We're going to take a look at the enhancements and bug fixes that are included in that release. Then we're going to have to talk for a couple of minutes about some upcoming support policy changes that we're going to have to implement. I'll explain all of that in due course. Let's talk about the release itself. It is set for tomorrow, so the release is imminent. In fact, since most people watch the webinars on YouTube, not live, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's probably already released. So we are set for tomorrow, I believe. There was one last minute issue that came in today. I don't know if we're going to hit it and address it because it is a browser-based issue and it is confined solely to Chrome. So we may take a look at it, and if we can dust it off today and get it in for a release, we may do that. But as far as I know, tomorrow is our release date. This is a release with which we have much confidence. The initial releases of 6.1 were a little rocky. As I'm sure you know, I'm not going to make excuses for it. I certainly could. The change in the UI was extraordinarily complex. There were some fundamental architecture changes in the product that it required. And frankly, we did not have adequate testing. And at the time, I'm not sure we could have had adequate testing to actually test everything else. However, we have a much more internal Q&A testing and much more internal testing. We've been able to automate a lot of basic QA testing that we weren't able to do before because we have some new tools, some of which are powered by AI to be able to go through and to test some various scenarios. Moreover, we also got a lot of feedback from customers about various bugs and stuff like that have been addressed. And as you can see, or will see in a few minutes, there were many, many bugs that we had to address in the product and did for this release. Plus, we have for the last month or so been running 6.1.300 beta for selected customers, and they've been putting it through its paces. There have been surprisingly few issues that have come up with the 6.1.300 beta. So we're very confident that we have a product that we would strongly recommend. If you're on 6.1.2xx or 6.1. anything, we would recommend that you upgrade to 6.1.300 at your earliest convenience. We feel that there are several issues that you might run into that if you upgrade, you'll simply never see and never run into. As always, the upgrade path is the same. Install it on Dev first, do some testing there, install it on your staging server. Be sure that the applications that you have tested previously in Stage, that you test them against the newest version, and only once you are fairly confident that you've tested everything that you need to test, go ahead and update prod with 6.1.300. So we would recommend, once we release 6.1.300, that you at least as quickly as is convenient, upload it onto Dev and begin doing your testing so that you can move that along. And of course, Process Director is a complex product. It has a lot of moving parts in it. So because it is so complex, and because the applications that you build on it may add additional complexity, testing is always the key with any upgrade. So be sure that you don't elide past the need for adequate testing of the product when you do an upgrade. So, what does this product contain? Let's start by talking about the enhancements. Some of these are fairly minor, one of which is fairly major. Most of these we've talked about before, but we're going to go through and review them fairly quickly. First of all, improved error handling and logging. We've made a couple of little changes, like changing the date time format on some logs to make them a little bit more comprehensible and understandable to you. We've also improved some of the logging areas so that the logging is better and more informative. Some things that were not previously not logged on a normal basis have been bumped up a little bit in the log so that you get logging off of things that you would not have previously seen unless you had raised your logging level to 3 or 4. So we've improved logging. Previously, you could create a global knowledge view that would export not only objects from the content list, but that would also export form instances, although there was a limit on the number of form instances that you could export. We have now transferred that capability over to form instances in a normal content list knowledge view. So you will be able to export form instances as well as form definitions. Now, let's not all get too excited about this. You do have to remember that there are many dependencies that form instances have, and those dependencies are all tied to process director objects on the source server. And therefore, there are UIDs which do not export or import into other servers that may be missing on some form instances when you bring them in. So form instances are tricky, and sometimes it's not going to be a perfectly clean import. So it's something you need to be aware of. It's not a cure-all for everything. And primarily, we've been using these form imports for, let's call them little independent forms that are created to provide some configuration information that you might need for an application. And so you might want to take one of these form instances that have some configuration settings so that in an application you can read the values on that form and provide some configuration for your application. So that's a fairly edge use case and a fairly complex one. And now you have the ability to expand that out to actually just pull a lot of extra form instances. We have removed the limit on those form exports. So rather than the internal limit of 100, you can now export however many form instances that you have selected to export in your knowledge view, although of course the knowledge views themselves default whenever you first create them to only 100 records. But there was an internal limit where we just wouldn't allow you to export more than 100 forms, even in the global KView. Now you can export as many form instances as you need, and you can do so in a contentless knowledge view. Multi-factor authentication has been implemented in the product. I know I've demonstrated that to you before. So multi-factor authentication will be available. It is assigned on a per account basis. So there is no global setting that says just make everybody multi-factor authentication. We didn't build that in. Most of the time, MFA is a user account level feature, and that's how we've kept it in the product, but it will be available for every account. We have built, for the first time, apparently, a 404 error page so that if you have a URL and it's wrong and there's no page there, what you don't see is just the old blank 404 server error that IIS serves up. We now have a custom 404 error page that will show up. As we've talked about repeatedly, OAuth has been implemented in the product. This is something I've talked about maybe 3 or 4 times over the past year on these webinars. Both Microsoft and Google's flavor of OAuth authentication have been updated and added into the product, not only in the product, but also into the appropriate custom tasks where it is applicable, and also the BP Logix utilities. So BP email import, that of course requires that sort of OAuth authentication so that you can use OAuth with Microsoft 365 where it's required, and also with Google, where if it is not required, it very soon will be. But I believe they've already implemented that requirement as well. So it's a requirement, and it is not just the product itself, but also the utilities and the custom tasks, which also, speaking of custom tasks, I skipped an item. Microsoft 365 CDA. Talked about that last week or last month, I believe, or maybe the month before that. That is the big new feature in this version of the product. So you can now, if you have collaborative document authoring, which is a separately licensed feature, and most of you do not have, some of you do, and if you do have it, you're no longer required to use only the OnlyOffice service for doing your document editing. You can, if you wish, implement your Microsoft 365 applications, Word, Excel, whatever, that you have in your Microsoft 365 installation in Azure. And you can also use your SharePoint as document storage, and you can just use CDA internally using your own Microsoft 365 setup. And that is a big, big feature for those of you who use CDA and who want to ensure that you keep all of your documents internally. Again, a monstrously complicated feature that took a huge development effort to implement. So it is the major feature in 6.1.300. And now back to the CTs, as I was about to eagerly jump into on a form definition. If you go into the form definition and you go to the custom tasks event mapping tab, all of the custom tasks are now movable by clicking and dragging with your mouse so that you can just move them up and down in the custom task list. You don't have to clicky those stupid arrow buttons up and down to move the custom task up one line at a time. There's now a little 3-dot menu that you can just click and hold your mouse, and you can just drag things back and forth. And we've already gotten some very nice beta feedback about how easy that makes some people's lives. The goal system variable has been updated. Previously, it would only return whatever the current value of the goal is. Now it can return the current value or the last evaluation date, the next scheduled evaluation date, also the previous evaluation result, in addition to its standard return of the current evaluation result for the goal. So we've had to change the syntax for how the goal system variable works. I talked about that, I believe, 2 months ago in this very webinar. Child and parent processes, when they are running prior to 6.1.300, I could send form and document attachments through one level down from a parent to a child process and one level back up from a child to a parent process. Several of you, however, have sub-processes that call their own sub-processes. So now we have parent, child, and grandchild. Prior to 6.1.300, we could not go through those three levels. I could go from parent to child. I could go from child to grandchild, but I could not go from parent to grandchild or grandchild back up to parent. I now can do that in 6.1.300. So we can now transfer the form and document attachments through multiple levels in a dependency chain in parent and child processes. We've added line wrapping as an option to data lists. As you may know, if you currently have a data list and you have a field that has a large amount of text, that text gets truncated so that it shows up on a narrow line inside the data list on your form. There's now a new option to do word or line wrapping. So rather than only being able to have a line or two of text after which it gets truncated, you can now add line wrapping and see all of your text, and the data list will expand on that row to show all of the data in that particular column when you have line wrapping turned on. The export files to file system custom task has been changed. So we've added a new little feature so that rather than just exporting the files themselves, you can now automatically place all of the exported files into a zip archive, and you can export the zip archive. You can do that all in one operation, whereas previously you had to export the files, then you had to go back and zip them all up if that's what you wanted to do. Now the CT will allow you to zip them. And speaking of this CT, it's not the only one that has had changes made to it. There were some bug fixes to some CTs. Some CTs, like Export Files to File System, have some new features. So even though technically the custom tasks are not directly associated with any particular process director version, would strongly suggest that if you download 6.1.300, you also download all of the newest custom tasks and install them after you install 6.1.300. I guess installing them is the wrong term. Import them after you install 6.1.300. Form data SQL views. Prior to 6.1.300, they were just ignored whenever you exported form definitions, which meant that if you exported form definitions that had SQL views from one server to another, then on the target server, you would have to reopen that form definition and recreate those views. That is no longer necessary. You now have the ability to export the views along with the form definition so that those views get created on the target server when the form is imported, which for some of you, I know is going to be a big deal. The group name property, or rather the comment group name property in a journal control, used to only accept text. Now in 6.1.300, it will accept system variables so that you can actually have dynamic group names for the comment groups in a journal control simply by supplying it via a system variable. So for example, on a form, you could take a form field, pull that system variable in and set that to the name as the user comment group name for that group. There are various security enhancements, which I, for obvious reasons, will not detail with any specificity, but we have made several security enhancements to the product. Some of the things that we fixed, just to round out the list, there were some Excel import issues, primarily with Boolean fields that were empty. Boolean fields aren't supposed to be empty. All Boolean fields are supposed to have a value, either 1 or 0. So if you're importing a spreadsheet with a Boolean field and you have blank rows, everything would go higgledy-piggledy. That doesn't happen anymore. We now know if it's blank, it's 0. Large data sources for charts. You had business values that brought back a lot of data. Charts were struggling to parse through all of that data. We've managed to fix that. Now, some of these you probably have never seen or might not ever see, like the current date being improperly parsed in kviews. And there was a delta between what the current date system variable said and what the current date said if you picked it from the choose system variable dialog box rather than typing in cur date manually. We fixed that delta. Duplicate users on SAML imports, and it looks like I skipped one again, but we'll talk about this since I've already announced it. Sometimes you imported users from SAML and they were duplicated. Now they're not. The interface URL was improperly parsed on some installations. As far as I know, this actually affects only one single customer. They're an on-premise customer and they installed Process Director as a virtual directory, which you can do, but is not what we recommend. But they did it, and some of the interface URLs, because it was coming out of this virtual directory, are a little wonky. If you're a cloud customer, obviously you'd never see that. If you're an on-premise customer, you probably won't see it either if you just used a regular folder for the Process Director import instead of trying to create a virtual directory. So you have to do a couple of, your installation has to be a specific setup for you to see this, but it was kind of a showstopper for this customer, and that has been fixed. The advanced reporting component, a couple of issues with exports of both Excel and CSV files. They were a little wonky. Now they aren't. And enabling conflicts between tab and child sections. If you had a tab and you disabled the tab, what is supposed to happen is you're supposed to be able to go in and enable individual controls in that tab. And they weren't being enabled. Although I don't fully understand what the use case was. It's got to be pretty weird, but if you have a disabled tab, how do you get to the tab to see your enabled controls anyway? Not entirely sure what the use case was. However, the way that the system is supposed to work is if you have an enabling conflict, the control at the lowest level always wins. And that wasn't happening in this case. And now it is. So that was a bug fix for at least that customer. Couple of weird things. You would go to the field drop-downs tab of a form definition, and some drop-downs weren't being listed in some cases in the drop-down. The drop-down that lists the drop-downs wasn't listing all the drop-downs. And so some of those drop-down controls were missing. We fixed that. A similar issue was happening with the field list on the set form data tab, where it simply wasn't showing you all of the available fields. We've managed to fix that, and now it does. Now, there was an interesting caching issue that would keep things in memory longer than it was supposed to. And one of the primary things that it would do is that if you updated a script and you uploaded it to the content list, it wasn't taking effect immediately. There would be like a delay, and it was several seconds of a delay, like 30 or 40 seconds of a delay, maybe a minute, where that script just wasn't being respected, even though you had made the change. And if you're like me and you throw a script up there and then you immediately start a form and run it to see how the script works, and if your changes aren't reflected, you kind of freak out because you expect it to happen. So there was this caching thing that was causing that. I believe it was also causing another error, again related to caching, where if you'd go change a workspace and save a workspace, then you would go look at it and the changes that you had made to the workspace would not appear because the old workspace was still being cached, and that cache would take 45 seconds, minute, whatever, to clear out and then show you your changes. So we had to go back in and look at how that caching was working. Caching is great because it saves a lot of memory and it improves performance because we can just pull stuff out of the in-resident memory rather than having to go back and do a server hit. But like too much sun makes a desert, too much caching makes things not change when you want them to change. So we had to address that. Case definitions, a weird little issue where if you set a case definition, you set a case property to be a unique property, well, you could set it all day long. That didn't necessarily guarantee that all of the values in that case property were in fact going to be unique. So we had to fix that. It just wasn't enforcing the uniqueness of the properties in that particular case definition. The update user system variable wasn't being properly parsed. So usually you call the update user to see who was the last person to make a change to a form, the last person to save it or the last person to submit it, or in the case of other objects, the last person who actually made an update to the object itself. It was being improperly parsed, and it wasn't returning the update user. It was, in fact, I believe, returning the create user. So we've managed to address that. Some save issues with the online form designer where controls would get a little weird, and if you didn't do things in a particular order, the save would fail, and you'd have to go back in and make some fixes to individual controls. It's a little pain. Probably some of you who watched the training webinar have seen me run across that a couple of times here and there while I'm sort of running through real quick trying to slap a form together, and you'll see an error on a control and I have to jump back in and fix it. We've had to address that with those save issues. Not anything major usually, and not usually a showstopper, just a constant low-level irritant. Some SAML login issues. We were passing the relay state more than one time during the login process. And for some systems, they really, really don't like that because they think that means you're trying to spoof their SAML system. And so they cast you into outer darkness whenever you pass the multiple relay states. So we went in and ensured that the XML that we were passing back only contained the relay state in a single place. Data lists, there were a couple of little minor issues with data lists. Sometimes columns that you had selected would drop out and the data list would return all of the columns. Some of the formatters weren't working correctly. Sometimes it would lose its connection to the data source and forget what data source it was. When you're trying to scroll through the data list, if you have a long data list with a large height, rather than scrolling through the data list, the form would scroll, but the data list wouldn't, which is really a CSS display issue. So we went through and addressed all of those issues with the data list to repair them. Even more bug fixes, and it's already 10:26. Some controls enable you to put wrapper tags on the control. So you might want to throw in a div tag around the control or whatever the wrapper tag is. And we weren't actually displaying those wrapper tags in the HTML when we printed it out to the browser. We fixed that. The collaborative document markup, you're supposed to be able to customize the tools in the CDM editor, and you weren't able to. Now you are. For some of the controls that you removed from the online form designer, this is kind of a major one, although it doesn't show up a lot. When it does show up, it's super confusing. You delete a control from the online form designer, but that control doesn't get marked for deletion in the form controls tab of the form definition. And you kind of look through the deleted controls and you don't see it. And you don't see the little thing there that allows you to remap it to another control. Super confusing. So we fixed that issue as well. Also, it could cause problems when you try to run the form because now the form is looking for a form field that doesn't actually exist, but hasn't been marked for deletion. And so your form errors out. And that's an absolute showstopper. Weird little deal where you'd convert to PDF and a form that had a routing slip wouldn't actually show the routing slip on the PDF, so we fixed that. QR codes weren't working. Again, this is a third-party library thing, and having to connect correctly to that third-party library, we fixed that. Business values. If you had a business value with HTTP headers and you deleted the HTTP headers and exported it and then imported it into your target server, what should happen is that if you've removed the HTTP headers from the exported version, when you import it, it should remove them when it overwrites the existing version, and it did not. It kept the old HTTP headers, even though they had been removed from the development version. So it was just a case of the import was not properly ensuring that removed HTTP headers were part of the XML so that there was an explicit instruction to remove them on import. Some backwards compatibility issues were fixed, so things that worked fine in this version but weren't translatable back to previous versions. As you know, we try to make Process Director as backwards compatible as possible. It's not always possible, but I think there's been two major C changes over the past 10 years where we couldn't go to backwards compatibility. But for the most part, we do try to enforce that, and we fix some of those backwards compatibility issues. And then there were the usual just general display CSS issues where things didn't appear the way that you expected. All right, it is 10:29. Took more time than I should have to get here, but we're looking at changing our support policy for Process Director. Now, as you may know, if you're a cloud customer, we already have a policy for upgrades and what you can upgrade or what you can request when you upgrade and what version you're going to upgrade to. We've had that for several months, explicitly noted. What we have not noted is, in general, if you keep an older version, how long are we going to support that version? Now, the problem is that we're doing constant development. We're doing 2, sometimes even 3 releases a year. And we're actually trying to regularize that onto a more or less predictable schedule. Our ability to support older versions is limited. In fact, I got a tech support ticket from a customer last week, and they said, hey, this is happening on our version of Process Director. And I looked back at the version number and it said 4.32. And I asked them, are you actually on 4.32? And their answer was, oh, yes, we've been on 4.32 for years. Yes, I know you have, because I am one of 3 employees at BP Logix who was here when 4.32 was the active general release. So nobody who works here now, especially anybody in services or engineering, none of them were here when that was an active release. If you have an old version like that and you come up with some technical issue and it is a problem with the product, okay, was that fixed sometime between 4.32 and now? So basically between 2014 and now, I'm sorry, 2015 and now. Okay, well, I am not really going to be able to ask any of my technical support people to go in and do a 10-year search of every possible issue to determine if your Process Director problem was fixed in, 5.36 or what have you. So when you have that many versions and you're regularly releasing, there's just a limit to how far back we can go. So we're discussing a version support policy. It's going to be aligned fairly closely with what we are already doing with our cloud upgrade policy. But of course, because this is an end of life, end of service policy, it is also going to apply to on-premise customers, and it is going to affect how technical support works. We simply can't be loosey-goosey about this. And while we might have just sort of lumbered on the way we have been, the United States Department of Defense has now made that impossible. We have DoD customers who cannot upgrade Process Director to a new version because the requirements that the DoD places on them means that if they want to upgrade from version 5 to version 6, there are hoops they have to jump through. And one of those hoops is that to justify their ability to upgrade is that we have to have an upgrade policy so that they can show the Department of Defense this version is no longer covered. It has gone end of life. We must install a newer version of it so that they can justify upgrading Process Director. In fact, we have a customer even now who is running a version of Process Director called 5.55. Have you ever heard of 5.55? No, you haven't, because it's not real. But we can't upgrade that customer to 6.1.x because a major version change requires all of this justification. So blame the government, and we have to have this sort of policy. So at some point, old versions simply have to drop out of support. So I can give you a glimpse of what that policy might look like. Again, this is all notional. This has not been approved, but this is what we're working on, and this is coming down the pike, and this is most likely what it is going to look like. We're going to release a new version, which means if you have an older version, it's going to remain fully supported for the next 6 months, and you don't have to worry about upgrading immediately or what have you. You're going to have 6 months where it's fully supported. There's going to be an additional 6 months where it will be supported on a case-by-case basis where possible. If obviously if something is wrong that we've fixed already in an upcoming version or in the new version, we're just going to tell you have to upgrade. Some things, we're going to make a best effort during that extended support period, but if we can't do it, we can't do it. And a lot of that extended support is certainly going to be confined to only critical issues, especially critical security issues. And then after 12 months, that version of the product, it just goes end of life. So when it hits end of service, we're going to start limiting your ability to get tech support for it. Again, we'll provide it on an as-able basis, but once you go into extended support, we're going to get a little trickier about how we provide that support. But again, this is all up in the air now. We have not formally done this. This is just what we're looking at in terms of an example, just so that you know that sort of policy is coming down the pike. We have a question. Is this information already available online? We're on a very old version and would like to push our upgrade. We are on 5.43. Yes, you are on a very old version. Not as old as some, but that is old. Now, when you say this, is this information already available online? I'm not sure what information you're talking about. As I've said, the policy that we are considering implementing that I just showed you has still not been formally approved and formally promulgated. Whenever we do approve it, I will certainly upload it to the support site so that it will be available to you there. So it will be publicly available whenever we get some approval. I would expect the approval would come in the very short term because we are working with our DoD customers to provide them with a policy that they can show the Department of Defense so that they can justify upgrading beyond version 5.55, a version that they are the only customer that has. So whenever it's formalized, I'll post it on Zendesk and there'll be an announcement on the homepage of the support site and you'll be able to see it right there. If you are on 5.43 though, I can pretty much tell you right now that your support is going to be extremely limited even now. We've been super loosey-goosey about what we might and might not support for older versions. And we've made, various accommodations and I've been happy to do that. But at 5.43, you're talking about a product that was released 5 years ago. So if you put in a tech support ticket on something with 5.43, I hate to say it, but don't be surprised if I tell you, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Your version is too old. You really do need to upgrade the product. If you're on a 5-year-old version of the product, you really should be considering upgrading. So you should be slapping a newer version. I mean, even 5.44.1104, even that would be a huge improvement. And we'd be happy to help you on that version. But going back to 5.43 or any of the 4 versions, it's probably going to be a no-go. But like I said, everything has just been sort of ad hoc. The ad hocness is going to change. And we are going to have a formal policy, and it will probably be a 6-month until end of service, which means don't expect full free technical support after 6 months from a new release. And then don't expect anything after 12 months, because after 12 months after a new release, your version is end of life, and we're not going to deal with it. That's as simple as we can put it. We simply can't go back and support continuously older and older versions, especially if we're going to be moving into, as we hope, into an era where we can put out at least 2 and probably 3, maybe even 4 releases per year. Now, some of these releases will just be very incremental and very minor, so we're going to kind of elide past that, but we have to have a formal policy that we can at least say, nope, your version is end of life. We simply can't support it. So I hope that answers your question. If not, you can always feel free to contact me directly via email if you need to. Well, I have certainly gone over time, 10 minutes over time, so I crave your indulgence for having gone so long, but boy, there was, as you can see, a heck of a lot to cover. I think 6.1.300 will be available tomorrow, so that was the last I heard, so unless something has come up today, which it might very well have since I've spent the last hour and 10 minutes uncontacted by the rest of the BP Logix world, who knows what might have happened in that hour, but I think tomorrow is the day. At the very least, sometime this week, 6.1.300 will be available. As soon as it is, it will be available on the support site. I will also post an announcement that will show up on the homepage at Zendesk so that you'll know as soon as that release is available. You can download it, slap it on your dev server, and start testing. Have a great month. For those of you who attend the training webinar, I'll see you on Thursday. For everybody else, I'll see you next month. So long.